There's a moment every ex-college athlete hits, and sometimes it's right after the last game. Sometimes it's weeks or months down the line. It's when you walk to the gym and you realize you don't know what you're training for anymore, or it's the first morning you wake up and you don't have to set an alarm clock, or your alarm clock's not at 5 o'clock in the morning anymore, or you have an afternoon and you don't have to report to anything. You don't have a coach anymore. You don't have practice anymore. You don't have any goals or things to strive towards on the calendar. You just have you. And for the first time in your life, that doesn't feel like you are split in a million different ways and that you have this, kind of weird clarity where you don't have all of these things you have to think about that are bogging down your calendar or your life anymore. But also, those things are what gave you guidance for so long. You have lost all of that structure because when you were an athlete, every day has a plan. So wake up, lift, eat, class, practice, recovery, repeat. You are going to go and eat with your teammates. You're going to probably know where you're going to study. You know what you're doing on the weekend because you're probably hopping on a bus or a plane or driving somewhere that is going to be where you have your next competition. And it's going to take up most of your weekend. And the rare weekend you have off, you're probably like used to hosting recruits or going home to visit family because you don't get to see them as often as other students do. And so you didn't have to think about how to stay on track. You didn't have to think about how your environment holds you accountable. You didn't have to think about all of these things that impact every moment of your life because it's always been structured for so long. And then all of a sudden, you finished that last competition and you knew it was coming. You knew you had that last day in the calendar, whether it was in a tournament your senior year where you don't know whether win or lose, but you know whenever you lose, it's going to be that last game, or you know if you're in a championship game, like it's the last chance you're going to get to compete. But when it ends, there's no off ramp. There's no, okay, like we're easing into it. You just no longer have to report to practice. You no longer have to be accountable to your coach. You no longer have to be accountable to your teammates. All of those things that you had structure around for so long are just suddenly gone. And that structure just disappears overnight. And that's when people start drifting, not because they're lazy, but because they lost the system that used to provide all of this, kind of barriers and accountability and structure that they're so used to having that all of a sudden the world's freeing. It's an amazing feeling when that happens because you don't have to have all these requirements. You get to choose and have freedom around what you're going to do with your life and what you're going to do with the spare afternoon and the direction you want to go. And then you graduate, you get to choose what city you're going to live in or what hobbies you like to do. If you want to continue your sport or explore something different, you have all of these options and it seems amazing right away. You're like, this is just the best thing ever. But at some point you start to realize like you are now accountable to yourself for all of the things that you had structure and guardrails around. And so there's a big identity shift that has to take place. And it's not really based around the schedule, but it's truly just that identity of who you were because you go from being an athlete to just being a regular person. And you don't realize how much of your confidence, your motivation, your purpose was tied to that label of being an athlete. For the first time in your life, you are someone that is not going to be identified by how you show up and compete or how you show up for practice. In that built-in friend group that knows you as an athlete, people are going to get to know you as the person you are, not connected to being an athlete anymore. And so that huge part of your identity is something that for some people, they did a really good job of kind of developing those things and what they enjoyed in their hobbies while they were an athlete. But for most people, like it consumed our lives. It was the only thing that we did for so long. There was a period when I was going from morning practice straight to class all day in high school, straight to practice, straight to another practice, just because I wanted to be able to swim in college and I like wasn't ultimately talented enough or really good enough to be able to just like get there, based off of like talent. Took a lot of work to make sure I actually got any opportunity at all. And so I had always had this almost like hustle mindset around just trying to find a way to get better and find a way to improve. And that was my identity. And I graduated and I went into college athletics. And that was my identity as well. It was like I was a coach. I identified as like athletics was the bubble. And that's my like background. That's like I was in that world and I stayed in that bubble longer than most. But that bubble, being inside that space, it almost seems like that's the only thing that matters and the only thing that exists because it's all you've ever known in the world that you've kind of been in. And so now it's like, okay, do I continue to be some sort of athlete? Do I continue post grad? Do I like be one of those guys that goes and runs marathons? So you start chasing it again. You try to train the same way, you try to eat the same way, you push yourself the same way. Maybe it's a marathon, maybe it's CrossFit. These days, maybe it's high rocks, maybe it's triathlons. Maybe it's rec leagues. Like there's a million different things you can do, but those are the common ones that typical ex-college athletes do is they want to find something to replace that intensity and something that replace that competitive drive. But you start to recognize like you can't really keep up with that when you start having a normal life. You start a career where you don't get to take a break in the middle of the day, or you don't have a wind down period. You're just like working all day. And if are you going to wake up early and work out? And, do you want to kind of keep that feeling of like, oh, I'm sacrificing waking up early, like doing all these things to help us feel like we're identifying with that athlete mentality that we had based towards being competitively excellent versus like now, like the race isn't really a season. The race is like being able to enjoy our life as a whole. And so you start to kind of wonder like what's wrong with me. Like I identified with all these things. I was incredibly disciplined. I worked hard. I worked out twice a day. I did all of my requirements. Like I did like all of this stuff so well. I'm like, why can't I do these things now? It's just the reality is, and like I've mentioned in previous episodes, you go through a phase where every single thing you do is about being competitively excellent. And now when you go in the real world, you don't have 20 hours a week to train anymore. You don't have the time to devote to recovery. And even now, like I have Normatex and I love the idea of being able to Normatech, but sitting in the same place for 30 to 40 minutes when I have a 2-month-old and a business to run and a family to provide for and spend time with, and people that I want to have relationships with, like that 30 to 45 minutes can probably go somewhere else. And so now it's like, okay, how do I maintain that feeling but fit it into my life and let it be a part that kind of enhances things versus it being something that is drawing us back. And as you're going through that, recognizing like I can't do what I did before, you start to think something's actually wrong with you, but nothing is actually wrong with you. You're not failing. You're just kind of playing a different game now, and nobody handed you the rule book of life and how fitting in being an athlete fits into that world. Because that world, there's millions of people out there that are just trying to get by, and they never even had the background that we have, and they never even were athletes. And so like it just makes it that much harder that we've never even experienced that part of it because we've always been so devoted to being an athlete. And so what do you do if you're in that spot? And if you're in that moment right now where you probably feel lost or disconnected, there's some things that you can do to provide some of that structure for yourself, but do it in a way that fits into your life. The first thing is rebuilding that structure into a way that fits your life now. And so you don't need a full training schedule. You don't need 20 hours a week. You just need kind of like a rhythm and flow that fits into your life. And the way we really like thinking about that is picking 3 to 4 non-negotiables each week where it's going to happen like no matter what. And you treat them as those are not necessarily your requirements, but the structure will set you up for success. Just like in sports, we know not just showing up every single day, but we know if we do what our coaches ask of us, we will improve. We will make some pretty big gains. We will be closer to being competitively excellent. And we hit those, we expect that to happen. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Like that's a whole nother conversation. But when you build that mindset, like, okay, I'm going to hit 3 or 4 30-minute workouts this week, or I'm going to walk 6,000 steps a day because I average 2,000 steps a day and I don't go anywhere, or I'm going to choose to be a little bit more prepared with my meals. Small requirements. They seem like pretty average. Like everybody should be able to do that. Like they're not overwhelmingly difficult. But when you stack week over week over week, just like we did in athletics, if we stack those wins, it will get us closer to that goal. And so understanding that it's okay for it not to be the most important bucket, it's just an area that allows us to unlock other parts of our life, meaning enjoying our relationships, enjoying time with the people around us, enjoying hobbies, enjoying what life has to offer, and the things that we sacrificed for so long we're able to do now. Like those things don't have to be sacrificed to be able to actually be an athlete now. And so we do have to redefine that goal a little bit. You used to train for competition, now you train for capacity. And what do I mean by capacity? Because what we think of capacity, we think of like aerobic capacity, or think how much we can lift, or how fast we can run, or how fast we can swim up and down a pool, or how fast we can row a boat. Like there's a millions of things that we think about, like, okay, this is what capacity means. But capacity for life is to live better, feel better, and perform in life. And performing in life means being able to actually show up for your relationships, be able to enjoy what life has to offer, serve others, and be able to actually embrace all of the opportunities that are there for you to make the most out of the life that allows you to live a fulfilled life now. So you're giving yourself something to work towards, but it's no longer a game. It's a reason or purpose versus something that's like a win or loss. Like now it's actually about, enjoying our life and being someone that's able to impact others for the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years. You want to keep the mindset, not the methods of being an ex-college athlete. The same discipline that made you great at your sport will make you great at health, business, relationships if you learn to apply it differently. This reframe will help ex-college athletes be athletes for the rest of their life in a way that serves them. That means that you're not done being an athlete. You're just evolving because being an athlete was never about the sport. It was about how you showed up for yourself, how you handled pressure, how you worked through fatigue, how you competed even when it didn't feel good. That part doesn't end. It just needs a new direction. So yeah, that moment when you realize you're not an athlete anymore, it's supposed to sting, but it's also the start of something better because now, for the first time, you get to define what winning looks like. So the jersey might be gone, but the mindset's still there. You're still an athlete. You're just playing for a different reason now. And it's important to consistently remind ourselves of that and think about how we are focusing on our health and our fitness and anything in our life, whether it serves us both now and in the future. Because it's great to be able to chase the goal of running a marathon, but if it's not something that you're going to be able to maintain for the next 30 years, maybe it's not something that you actually need to prioritize. Because when you actually set up your health in a way where you can be consistent and healthy for the next 30, 40, 50 years, you can enjoy other things and put that bucket in a place where it still serves that ability for you to grow your capacity, but it doesn't consume you as a person.